During the early morning hours of the 22nd of May, both the German battle group and the British battlecruiser squadron were at sea. As they sailed towards the Denmark Strait, Lutjens received a signal from Naval Group North, which reported that no photographic reconnaissance of Scapa Flow had been possible during the course of the previous day, owing to the weather. Nevertheless, it reported that visual reconnaissance had reported 3 heavy units, an aircraft carrier, and several cruisers and destroyers as being at anchor. Around 6 p.m., rain began to fall, and 20 to 25 knot winds from the southwest created whitecaps. Visibility began to deteriorate, and patches of fog began to be encountered. So much did visibility deteriorate that on occasion Bismarck trained her searchlights astern periodically to assist the Prinz Eugen with keeping station astern the battleship. As Hood and Prince of Wales raced towards Naval Fjord, and the bulk of the home fleet waited at readiness to sail, the battleship HMS Rodney was at sea, heading out across the Atlantic. By May 1941, almost 16 years had passed since HMS Rodney had been launched, and her last refit had been 3 years earlier. Armed with 9 16-inch guns, Rodney and her sister ship Nelson were the most heavily armed battleships in the Royal Navy. Carrying the scars of battle gained during the German conquest of Norway the previous year, in the face of the continuing air threat posed by the Luftwaffe, it was deemed unwise for Rodney to undergo a period of docking in the UK. Subsequently, the ship, it was decided, would sail for the United States, where she could be refitted over several months. Rodney departed the River Clyde on the 22nd of May as an escort to the transatlantic liner Britannic, which had been requisitioned as a troop ship, which was bound for Halifax. Rodney herself was carrying 512 men who were to be landed at Halifax, including men suffering from shell shock, Canadian military personnel who were returning home, airmen who were to undergo training in Canada as part of the Commonwealth Air Training Program, also known as the Empire Training Scheme, and naval cadets for training in Bermuda. On the upper deck, 4,000 boiler tubes had been stored. On top of one of the 16-inch turrets were mountings for 3 8-barrel 2-pounder anti-aircraft guns, along with the gun barrels. Secured to the boat deck was a section of armour plating, which was to be fitted below decks to repair bomb damage incurred during operations in and around Norway in 1940. It was not just refit items that Rodney carried. In the chapel of the ship were cases containing some of the Elgin marbles, while stored in an area in the bow were some of the last reserves of British gold. Having departed the Clyde, Rodney's commanding officer, Captain Frederick Dalrymple Hamilton, took the opportunity to address the ship's company over the tannoy. He revealed that the Rodney was scheduled to reach Halifax on the 29th of May, and that the ship would depart for the Boston Naval Yard the same day. At 7:40 p.m. on the 22nd of May, news reached Tovey that the German ships had sailed. Tovey immediately issued orders to Wake Walker to be on the lookout for the German ships, while Holland was ordered to take Hood and Prince of Wales to the southwest of Iceland. 11:15 that evening, the bulk of the home fleet sailed from Scapa Flow. In company with Tovey's flagship King George V sailed HMS Victorious, the cruisers Galatea, Hermione, Kenya, and Aurora, along with 7 destroyers. HMS Repulse was also ordered to weigh anchor with her destroyer escorts and to rendezvous with Tovey's force. As the home fleet set sail, Churchill was preparing to leave London for Chequers, the Prime Minister's official country retreat, where, Over the weekend, he was to entertain a very special guest, W. Averell Harriman, President Roosevelt's special envoy to Britain. Harriman had been sent to Britain to assess the situation after 2 years of war. Churchill, for his part, was keen to ensure that Harriman was on side, as he had a direct line of communication to the American president, whom Churchill was attempting to establish a firm relationship with, and whose support he was eager to count upon in the prosecution of the war. Realizing that it suited British aims for the United States to be kept informed of the Bismarck and the threat that she posed to the convoy lanes, during the evening of the 22nd of May, which he had described as being a day of uncertainty and suspense, following receipt of a message from the Admiralty that the German ships had sailed, Churchill drafted a telegram to Roosevelt advising him of the sailing of the home fleet. The night passed uneventfully, and during the morning of the 23rd of May, Lockheed Hudson took off from Wick to provide air cover to Hood and Prince of Wales. Locating the ships, the Hudson proceeded to fly a circuit over the rear quarters of the battlecruiser squadron, looking out for U-boats. As visibility began to deteriorate, the Hudson reached the limit of its fuel. Before departing for Wick, the crew closed the range to the battlecruiser squadron and took a series of photographs of the two ships, in particular of the Hood. Having departed company with the Hudson, Hood and Prince of Wales conducted gunnery drills. During the course of the drills, Prince of Wales encountered a number of problems with her 14-inch guns, leading to concerns regarding the main battery if Bismarck was located and engaged. The front flash doors could not be completely opened, and the cage of the No. 2 gun in A turret could not be loaded. The gunnery drill also saw the shell arrestor at the shell ring level jam in A turret. The arrestor could not be freed, and work continued for the remainder of the day by the Vickers Armstrong contractors to rectify this defect. In B turret, the arrestor for the central hoist of the No. 2 gun would not withdraw after ramming a shell. The hinge trays in the forward shell room fouled the locking bolt on the revolving shell ring, which resulted in both trays being bent. Owing to defects in the hinge tray, it would not be possible for the Vickers engineers to replace the arrestor, which had been fouled, until 1 a.m. the following morning. Meanwhile, Bismarck and Prinz Eugen approached the entrance of the Denmark Strait, where the fog which had enshrouded them for the previous 24 hours began to dissipate a little, and visibility began to improve. By midday, the edge of the pack ice had been reached. To avoid minefields, the two ships skirted the edge of the pack ice, but frequent alarms during this part of the passage brought with it drastic alterations of course to avoid ice damage to the hull and propellers. During the early evening of the 23rd, the piercing shrill of alarm bells rang out, sending men racing to their action stations. The evening of the 23rd of May found HMS Suffolk at the northern end of the minefield on a southwesterly course, before reversing course to take up a northeasterly patrol line. As Suffolk patrolled on her southwesterly leg, she hugged the edge of the fog bank. By doing so, she could swiftly seek cover should contact with the enemy be made. On the reverse, the northeasterly patrol line, the ship sailed close to the ice. When doing so, however, she had nothing to hide in. As she patrolled up and down the strait, Suffolk relied on her Type 279 air warning radar and her Type 284 radar with a rotating antenna mounted on the main armament director, abaft the bridge. When in operation, the Type 284 covered a 270-degree arc to the front and sides of the ship. Owing to the construction and layout of the ship, a 90-degree arc was not covered by the radar, the pulses blocked by the superstructure and the large slab-sided hangar, which created a radar blind spot. In an effort to cover this blind spot, lookouts were posted on the compass platform. Norfolk, meanwhile, was 15 miles to the south of Suffolk. Like Suffolk, Norfolk too had radar. As Norfolk patrolled up and down the Denmark Strait, Wake Walker stood behind Captain Alfred J. Phillips, the cruiser's commanding officer, on the open bridge. For hour after hour, as the cruiser rose and fell on a moderate sea, as she worked southwest through the fog and rain, large floating chunks of ice were crushed under the bow and bounced down the side of the hull. At 7:22 p.m., a lookout aboard Suffolk sighted Bismarck looming out of the murk on the starboard quarter at a range of approximately 7 miles. Seconds later, Prinz Eugen was also sighted.
Suddenly at 7:20, helped build to my line, shouted ship, and then 2 ships. I swung like a rocket round, sweeping up fast from behind us, coming up behind us, and the starboard water. Bismarck being talking. What had actually happened is that the weather, which was closed right down, had suddenly lifted, and they were there on our starboard quarter. And I know the distance because right behind me in the forward control, there was a communication person who was repeating messages from the radar on us. And although we'd seen them first visually, I heard him say, "Echo bearing, green 140, 12,000."
The cruiser immediately heeled over as the helm was put hard over as the ship made for the safety of the fog at high speed. As Suffolk raced for the fog bank, signals reporting enemy in sight were sent below from the bridge to be coded before being passed to the wireless operators. Within a few minutes, the signals were supposed to have been received at the Admiralty. More signals went out to Torvey and to the other ships on patrol searching for the German ships. As the signals went out, Suffolk disappeared into the fog. Having made the safety of the fog bank, Suffolk waited, sending out a string of enemy reports while operators watched the 2 blips on the radar screen that represented the German ships pass from right to left. Once the German ships were at a range of 13 miles, at the limit of Suffolk's radar range, she left the safety of the fog and took up a position in the wake of the Prinz Eugen. Having received Suffolk's contact report, Norfolk began to close at high speed through the dense fog. Norfolk closed the German task force almost bow on, with the intention of making contact with Suffolk. Because her radar was not effective as that of the Suffolk, Norfolk lost track of the Bismarck and Prinz Eugen in the mist. In their eagerness not to lose contact, those aboard Norfolk misjudged their course, prompting the cruiser to break the cover of the fog, with Bismarck heading towards the cruiser at a range of 6 miles. The German gun crews were already at their action stations. Within seconds, Bismarck's forward guns thundered and belched flame, as the first 4-gun salvo was fired at Norfolk. It was the first time that Bismarck had fired her guns in anger. Having broken from cover, Norfolk immediately retreated into the fog. Parts of the ship were pockmarked by splinters from Bismarck, but no significant damage was incurred. Damage had, however, been wrought elsewhere. The blast and concussion from the Bismarck's guns when firing at Norfolk damaged the battleship's forward radar, meaning that the flagship to the task force was now blind ahead. A desire to see ahead, and also the fear that the British cruisers might creep up on the Prinz Eugen in the poor visibility, caused Lutjens to order the Prinz Eugen to take up the guide of the task force with her fully functioning radar. Bismarck reduced speed and made a slight alteration to port while Prinz Eugen increased speed. Slowly, the heavy cruiser began to inch up the starboard side of the battleship. Following her close encounter with Bismarck, like Suffolk before her, Norfolk sent out an enemy report timed at 8:32 p.m. and then settled down to commence shadowing. Aboard Rodney, Captain Dalrymple Hamilton received the report from Norfolk. As he scrutinized the report, he judged that while his ship's current course was taking Rodney in the general direction, there was no reason to abandon Britannic and to engage the German ships. In any case, units of the home fleet much further north were more likely to see action. It was to Holland, with Hood and Prince of Wales 300 miles away, to whom the news was of the greatest interest. By now, the weather was becoming increasingly worse, and Holland's ships began to bump around in the rough seas as snow flurries began to whip into the ships. As the destroyers struggled to maintain pace with Hood and Prince of Wales, they fell astern with instructions to follow at best speed. As Hood pressed on with Prince of Wales in tow, aboard the battle cruiser, Commander Cross delivered an electrifying broadcast to the ship's company in which he stated,
"We are expected to intercept the enemy at 0200 tomorrow morning. We shall go to action stations at midnight. In the meantime, prepare yourselves, and above all, change into clean underwear."
Aboard the two ships, preparations were made for battle. Watertight doors were shut, and men donned anti-flash clothing as they waited anxiously. As Hood and Prince of Wales prepared for action, Bismarck and Prinz Eugen entered a snowstorm where contact was lost aboard Suffolk and Norfolk. Even with contact lost, there was no cause for undue alarm. On several occasions already, the German ships had been out of contact, yet contact had always been regained. Every possibility existed that Bismarck would soon emerge from the snowstorm, therefore any hasty reactions were unwise. Contact was not, however, immediately regained. At 2 a.m. on the 24th of May, Holland ordered a turn, which put Hood and Prince of Wales onto a southerly course, while the destroyers continued north. The turn allowed Holland to maintain a bearing on the German task force if they had altered course to the south. The decision to send the destroyers north was a prudent move, as Holland issued the order not knowing where Bismarck and Prinz Eugen were. They therefore offered a greater search capability. The period of uncertainty as to the whereabouts of the German ships ended shortly before 3 a.m. when Suffolk regained contact. It quickly became clear to Holland that the Germans had made no alteration of course, while Suffolk and Norfolk were out of contact. Upon regaining contact, Suffolk once more sent out a stream of reports, reporting on the movements of the enemy. When Suffolk regained contact, it was shown that Holland had lost his bearing on the enemy, meaning that his original plan to cross the T was no longer possible. Nevertheless, Holland still possessed the element of surprise, and he still held a heavy gun advantage over the German task force. With it apparent that there was no immediate prospect for battle, the men of Hood and Prince of Wales were ordered to a relaxed state of readiness. The opposing forces continued to close on one another throughout the remainder of the early hours. Shortly after 5 a.m., the crews of Hood and Prince of Wales once more went to action stations, as the stage was set for the largest clash of British and German ships since Jutland in 1916.
Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more updates, like and share. You can also help to support the channel at Patreon. Details are in the description box below.